As you all know, there has not been a novel in the Vampire Chronicles since 2003, and what you are all holding in your hands is finally the next, and thankfully not the last, volume in the series. As you all do, we love Anne Rice at 192 Books, and we have been completely enraptured by her books. So we are more than thrilled to invite her here to talk with you all tonight. Anne is joined on stage by her longtime editor, Victoria Wilson, Vicki has been Anne's editor ever since Interview with the Vampire came out in 1976. So they are quite a duo. Vicki is also the author of a beautiful and epic biography of Barbara Stanwyck, the first volume of which is available now. But she is currently at work on the second volume, so you can look forward to that.
That's another story.
And to interview them tonight, we have novelist Andrew Sean Greer, who is the author. The author of The Confessions of Max Tivoli, The Impossible Lives of Greta Wells, and several other novels as well. And in addition to being a writer, he is also one of us, which is a huge fan of Anne Rice. So, on one practical note before we begin, we'll ask that you silence your cell phones and any electronic devices now. And we will listen to them talk for about 40 minutes. Then we will take some questions from the audience. So please be thinking while you sit there what you might want to know from Anne. And then we will have a book signing, but you will hear more about the practicalities of that at the end. So for now, I'm going to hand it over to these three wonderful people and enjoy.
Thank you.
I am here merely as a conduit of the enthusiasm that's shared by all of you in order just to hear Anne and Vicki talking, but who has been following her on Facebook recently. And I have not seen anyone as giddy about a publication since a first-time novelist. It's been really exciting to see you still so excited.
Oh, yeah, very excited, no question.
And it amazes me also, I'm envious of your long-term marriage, in a way.
It is indeed a marriage, yes.
Yeah. 40 years.
Can
40
you
years.
tell us a story about when you met?
Well, when we met is not when the story began. The story began before that. The story began, Anne has her story of when she wrote the book, which you could tell. And I have my story about when I read the book, when I first read the manuscript, which I can tell, and it depends if you want to start with your story of when you wrote the book.
Well, what I was thinking about was the first time I saw you. We were at Squaw Valley Community of Writers, and that we were in some class or something, and you came in, and I remember you were wearing sunglasses, and they introduced you as an editor from New York. And we didn't even talk. We didn't even, get acquainted at that point. But I had entrusted Interview with the Vampire to an agent who was also at the conference, and she showed it to you, actually sent it to you when you went back to New York, right?
Correct.
And that's when I first heard that you wanted to publish it, and I'll never forget that moment, ever, in my life. I think the call came on my birthday. And,
really?
Yeah. And I was so used to, anybody calling the house wanting my husband, that when the agent from New York said, "Can I speak to Anne Rice?" I thought she said Stan Rice, so I just gave him the phone. He said, "No, they want to talk to you." And I thought, well, who could possibly, But anyway, she told me that you wanted to publish the book, and I was just overwhelmed. I mean, it was a turning point. Everything changed at that point for me. And then I first met you by mail after that, through your letters, wonderful, enthusiastic letters. Then we talked on the phone. Then we got to know each other in New Orleans. You came down to New Orleans before the book was published.
A trip I will not forget. Anne gave me quite an experience of New Orleans. But before we discuss that, let me just tell you that my experience of this was that it's a sort of good story, because I went to the man who was the head of Knopf at that time, Bob Gottlieb, who had hired me, and who was probably the most famous editor and publisher of certainly 20th century publishing, and the latter half of it. And I said, I want to go to this writers' conference. And he said, why do you want to go to a writers' conference? Nobody ever finds anything at a writers' conference. And I said, well, I really want to go. And he said, all right. So off I went, and I had a writer who I published who was there, Alice Adams. Mm-hmm. And she was living with somebody who had a fabulous house in Truckee that was like out of a Douglas Sirk movie. And we were having lunch. I'd gone back and forth to the conference, and we had lunch. And I remember the lunch was sort of over the Truckee River. And I think Phyllis might have been there. Anyway, we were talking about this book that Phyllis had read, that the agent has read, and she was sort of going on about it. And she said, well, I don't remember how many pages. It was sort of long. And I said, well, just send it to me. So she sent it to me in New York, and I remember carrying it home. I remember everything about reading this book, and how many thousands of books have I read since 10,000 books have I read and published after that, since that moment. I brought it up to my apartment on my 4th floor walk-up. I was 22 or 23. And I started reading this book, and my blood changed. I don't mean this as a pun, but it quickened, and I had literally a physical response, was having a physical reaction to this book, and I said, oh my God, this isn't like anything else I've ever read. And there were so many things that it addressed in terms of large questions about the universe, about good, about evil, about being outcast, about, so many deep questions that nobody was thinking about, nobody was certainly writing about. And I brought it into Knopf, and I said to Bob, you have to read this book, it's just an amazement. And he read it, and he said, yes, it really is. And I went ahead and I made the offer, and that changed our culture.
Wow, it was a great moment for me. It was incredible, and we've been together ever since, through all kinds of different experiences.
Yes,
just amazing experience. I mean, 40 years is mind-boggling.
I know.
I think we must have the longest relationship between
we
the author
definitely
and
do.
editor that anybody knows
Maybe
of.
even in marriage itself.
Yeah.
But it's for richer or for poorer, for better or for worse, and we've been through those.
Yeah.
We've been through it all.
Yeah.
Has it changed? Editing, and has that changed, or has your relationship changed since?
Well, the relationship has completely changed. I mean, I think it took time for us to get to know each other and for us to work out, like any marriage, for us to work out what was acceptable, what wasn't acceptable,
Right. Yeah.
what you needed, what I needed.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely, but what's so fabulous, I think, is, and I think it's a shame that it doesn't happen with most authors because editors leave so quickly now, but Knopf is, It's basically, I call it the town that time forgot, which it really is, because it's living in another century, even though it's very much in this century. And that is that people have been there. I mean, I've been at Knopf for more than 40 years, but there are many people who've been there so much longer than I've been there. And that continuity is so crucial. Most writers don't have it because it translates to, here I am, I've watched the evolution of Anne's writing and her personhood, and she's watched the evolution of my personhood. But more than that, it's a house that's also published those books and sold those books and publicized her and all of the memories of all of the people who've worked on all of these books. And there's that sales force that's changed, but that hasn't changed. They have been selling her books for 40 years. And I mean, that is really an amazing experience. I don't mean to not be paying attention over here.
They're all looking at Anne.
Okay, no. Anyway, so...
how is her writing changed? Or is it easier to see exactly what to do with what she hands you, or?
Well, I can't talk, I mean, that's up to Anne. Anne has to talk about that.
Well, I think Vicky's always been very understanding. I'm a person who can go screaming crazy if someone marks on my manuscript and writes a word that upsets me. But she's always been very understanding of that. And whatever she says, I trust her completely. And she has always made great comments on the work, and but she's very restrained because she knows that every word, every sentence, every paragraph, I hear it in my head, and the rhythm is very, very important to me. So I've always appreciated Vicky's tact and her care, and yet she will absolutely say what she believes. She'll say, I don't understand why this character, for example, why does the hero love this character? Could you just tell me more about this character? Why is he lovable? And that's the type of remark that I actually find very fruitful, because I do see the character quite completely, and I think, okay, I'll just talk more about the character and explain exactly what the problem is. But it's that kind of feedback that's really helpful.
Because you've done all that work ahead of time.
Well, we really connected, and the thing I felt from the beginning was that Vicky got whatever I was doing, no matter how strange it was. I mean, she got it. She understood. There was never a problem. I mean, when she would call it, she really got the weirdness of the book, the darkness in it, the transgressive elements, the violence, the erotic undertow, whatever. She got it, and she never shied away from it. And that's really what anchored the whole thing for me, I think. Plus the fact that her comments were always so wise and almost prophetic. They had a quality sometimes to them.
What do you mean prophetic? That you kind of knew that would...
I would remember years later things that she said, and they were as useful to me as we went along. Maybe prophetic is not the right word, but her responses to books tended to echo for me, to resonate for a very long time. It's almost like I have a file in my mind of all the different things she said in the first phone calls when she, that was always an event. Vicky's finally calling, she's finished the book, she's calling. Get me my coffee, shut the door.
Before cell phones, you had to sit and kind of wait for the...
Exactly. And then, to write down all the first notes, that was an event. But I can remember things that she said from the very beginning. And they echo throughout my whole process and my whole development.
We talk about the Vampire Chronicles, but actually your first books moved to a lot of different topics. You were editing a lot of different sort of styles, not styles, but books before.
Well, different kinds of books.
Different kinds of books,
Yes.
And sort of spreading out everything you could possibly do.
But I know that there is this category. I'm not even sure what whether it's fantasy or what is the category?
What is the category?
I don't know. I mean, I don't see these books, or really, maybe, yes, novel, biography, cookbook, but I don't see Anne's, and I don't see it as...
Oh, could you do a cookbook?
Yeah, we'll do it.
As fantasy. It's just a wonderful novel that transports me and takes me someplace else, and that has those merits. And that, to me, is what's valid and valuable.
And what realism actually is. Like, it's reflecting your actual feelings.
Right,
You know,
and
I think
that's
that's
what,
what
well,
everybody-
I mean, Interview with the Vampire went so deep, and it was so ahead of its time. But in terms of my life and the feelings that what I was going through, I was right there. I was right there with it. And then the next book we didn't do together. And then I went out to San Francisco because there were a lot of people I was publishing who lived in San Francisco. And then I called Anne and said, you know, let me come by and how are you and let's visit. And I said, what are you working on? And she said, well, I'm working on this book about castrati. And I said, how fabulous. Tell me about it. And, but I loved the idea right away. And that really wasn't a book about, I mean, it was about that world, but there was a darkness. And of course, interrupt me at any moment, but there was a darkness about, that book was about something else. The darkness of that book was about, something else.
Well, you know, when I look back on that period, I don't think the words genre meant anything to us. It just didn't mean anything at all. And even the subject of the book wasn't really the crucial factor. And I felt like I found a home with you at Knopf because you valued writers and you valued the voice of the writer, the distinctive voice. That's what you look for. People have said that's what characterizes Knopf books. They have a distinct voice. And when you mentioned the second book, okay, we didn't do the second book together. The people who did do the second book, they didn't want a book about castrati because subject matter and genre did matter to them. They didn't think that Italian castrated opera singers was a subject that anybody would want to read about or would sell. But when you came over and we talked about it, that isn't the way you saw it. You didn't see it as commercial, non-commercial topic. You just saw, okay, this is what Anne's doing now, and you could see a connection. You know, again, a marginal group of people, outsiders, outcasts, similar themes, but it wasn't the topic for you so much. At least that's what I felt. You were kind of
Well, I was intrigued by the subject.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't
Yeah.
say, how many people will be interested
Right.
in 18th century castrati? I mean,
yeah. So I was very glad to go back and very happy that that worked out that way.
I know you have lots of contact with your fans and always have, and I know there's always fans who are, for a long time, saying, we want more Lestat, or we want more witches. Why aren't you doing more witches? But you must have never said anything to her about what?
no, I never said.
Never, yeah.
If anything, I said, ignore them. Just write what you want to write.
Yeah.
Because-
You know what they're really asking, all the readers are always asking is, please write the best book that you can write for us. That's really what they're asking. And that's what every author has to try to do, write the best book. I mean, they may throw out suggestions, you know. Like this morning, in the midst of all my excitement about Prince Lestat, you know, I was really excited. I was posting on Facebook like a child, you know, saying, really excited. And in the midst, and all these people were putting up wonderful, generous posts. I got it at Costco, I got it at Walmart, it came in the mail, it's on my Kindle. And right in the middle of this, somebody said, I wish you would write a sequel to Cry to Heaven about the castrati. Okay. I really, for a moment, felt like, I don't know what to do. No, this is a compliment, Anne. What's wrong with you? You know, just relax. But I felt like I'd let that person down. You have another book about the opera. Oh, well. Anyway. But I love the voices of all those people on Facebook. I love it. It's absolutely wonderful.
We've got 1.1 million.
1,122,000,
Oh.
yeah, 122,000, 1,122,000. But not all those people see every post on Facebook. You know, Facebook has this magic algorithm, and they send your posts out to different people. So there are topics I want to talk about on Facebook that they don't want to talk about, and they'll send it to 5,000 people. And then you'll post on your cat, and they'll send it to 200,000 people. So it's just what happens.
What do you like about Facebook so much?
Oh, the immediate contact, the fact that I can get up and ask any question of my readers on Facebook, and they will give me fabulous, wonderful, authentic answers within minutes. You know, like the other day, I was thinking about Clarence Darrow and the fact that that famous lawyer had actually written on the first page of his autobiography that he didn't think life was worth it. And I'll never forget that he did that. You know, I was reading his life, and he said he did not think life was worth it. So I asked everybody on the page, I said, do you think life is worth it? And if you don't, you know, would you explain why? And we got thousands of answers, wonderful, long answers, thoughtful answers from people about their life experience and why they did think it was worth it and times when they didn't think it was worth it. Now, where else are you going to go with that? You know, the people around me are sick of me popping up at breakfast with a question like that. They really are. So I go in there and I talk to the people on the page, and they are always there, any time of night. Get up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Something's bothering me, I'm obsessed with something. You know, like, what do you really think happens after we die? What do you really believe happens after we die? I ask them, they talk, they're there.
You got me fascinated with the Michael Faber article that you
Yeah,
pasted.
Michelle Faber, yeah,
I'm sorry?
well, maybe it's Michael, yeah.
That he was not going to ever write
Yes, that was
again.
an article that was in the New York Times 2 days ago about how now that his wife has died, he's sure this book he's written about her will be the last. So I put it up there for people to talk about, and we got wonderful discussions about it. I think we all hope that he'll change his mind later on and write some
I feel
more.
like he's got to.
Yeah, we hope that he will.
Drives him.
Yeah. But Facebook's perfect for that, for all these different topics. And there's no rule with me about what to post except to be authentic. It's got to be me posting, and it's got to be something I care about, you know? Nobody ever goes on the page pretending to be me. That doesn't happen. Yeah. So,
It's fantastic. You should all
is
be
there something you
following
would
her.
like me to ask?
Let me think about this.
Well, you were also writing on your Facebook page about your fans who are here, and especially ones that getting around Halloween and they're dressing up, and that you admire that they have a romantic sense of life.
Yeah.
And do you have a romantic sense of life?
Oh, very much. I mean, I think the Romantic Revolution is still going on, and I'm a romantic writer. You know, I'm in the tradition of the Bronte sisters and Edgar Allan Poe and Hawthorne, and people, you know, the more romantic sensibility in literature, as I see it, both popular and high literature, I'm with the romantics, and I love Halloween in particular because I think it's a great romantic feast and festival. And it seems to me that Americans are loving Halloween more every year. Mm-hmm. It's like Halloween's now a big deal everywhere. People are embracing that idea of dressing up in costumes, and that fascinates me, that Americans want to do that. You know, I come from New Orleans, where people are used to things like Mardi Gras. There's a big Dionysian dimension to life in New Orleans, but the rest of America is not necessarily that way. And many people live much saner, more wholesome lives than we live down south.
colorful.
Yeah, oh yeah, less colorful. I was trying to put it. But Halloween is kind of like Mardi Gras, and it always has been, and it's one of those big mayhem feast days in the calendar. And I do love all of that very, very much. And all the vampire fans at heart, the vampire readers at heart, I think are almost always romantics, very much. Yeah.
I mean, I know when I picked up the books first, it meant everything to me somehow. And all of the things you said about being an outcast, but also a romantic, that I got to dress the way I wanted.
Yeah.
And it seemed that you were longing for a heightened sensation and experience of life, and not a dull one.
Very much so.
And you're going to the Vampire Ball this year.
Yeah, I'm going to Lestat has a fan club in New Orleans, and he's had that fan club since 1984 or 5, when the Vampire Lestat was published. And they give this huge vampire ball every Halloween, and they've been doing it for 26 years. And I am going this year for the Lestat Coronation Ball, and it's going to be a trip. I think they've sold 1,000 tickets, and they're having a Lestat contest, who looks the most like him, is dressed like him. Everybody comes in costume. People come from all over the world, and they spend a lot of time on their costumes, and it's always a kick to go. Vicki went last year. Yeah, it was fun.
Did you dress up?
I wore a mask. Actually, I even forgot. I just went downstairs, and then everybody had masks. So I just sort of said, I'll take that mask, and just Father Joe's mask. We shared it, yes.
Okay.
And it was quite something. The costumes were spectacular. I mean, people take this very seriously, and they spend a lot of time and thought and energy, and it's full of invention. I mean, it's sort of fabulous in the true sense of that word. I mean, it really was impressive. And I think this year, we're both going to be there, and I think this year it's going to be even more spectacular because, after all, Lestat is back.
Well, it's going to be more exciting, I think. You know, last year I couldn't even tell them that the book was coming because it was under wraps, and we wanted to keep it secret. And it was an agony for me to be standing up on the stage talking to them and not be able to say Lestat's coming back. And thank you for, you know, for being so encouraging all these years about these characters. But now we're going back, and it's going to be all about him, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
It's going to be a huge celebration.
Sounds incredible. And you broke the news on your son's radio show,
I
right?
I did, yes. Yes, my son Christopher Rice has a radio show that, internet radio out of West Hollywood called The Dinner Party Show, and he made me promise very early on that I would break this news on his show or he would kill me, you know. So I had to tell Vicki, and the whole house had to just play along with me.
It was quite an element of coordination because,
Yeah.
in fact, it came at the time when we were having our sales conference, so we couldn't even tell our sales people
Yeah.
that this book was coming. I kid you not. Because it had to be on Anne. So look, she wants to do it on her son's radio show.
Yes.
Fine.
And her son will kill her.
So we made that happen.
We understand, she's in
We had an
jeopardy.
entire sales conference, and the salespeople were not allowed to know until X point.
Yeah. But it was a lot of fun to do it that way, you know. We were in the studio there. He has this tasty little studio that's all decorated and kind of fun, and I announced it, and people were posting on Facebook on the Dinner Party Show page, and it was very exciting. It was very enjoyable, you know. Each book has its own story and its own intensity, but this one is very special to me, and special, thankfully, to a lot of other people. So.
Well, people can look online for other things, but I think everyone wants to know what it was like to return to Lestat's voice.
I really missed him. I really, really missed him, and I had to kind of court him to get him to come back, you know? I mean, I don't want to sound coy, but this is really a character that almost feels as if he's speaking through me from some other place. I mean, it really does feel that way. I can't just sit down and say, well, I'm going to write as Lestat today. It's not like that. It's not automatic. I have to get with him and let him come through. And when he does come through, there is an intensity and a coherence, and it begins to flow. But there are many false starts, as if he's standing there with his arms folded, saying, I'm not ready. I'm not talking. You don't have it right. Wrong location. Do it over. You know, and then finally he starts speaking, and then he won't shut up, you know. And he just takes over my life. And that's the way it is right now. I'm already writing the second book in my head, Blood Paradise, and it's just pouring out. It's pouring out. I'm trying, I don't really think about length, but I would prefer if it was not 2,000 pages. So I'm really trying to, you know, figure a way to channel the energy.
Has he changed in your head as a voice? Or?
He's developed, but he hasn't really changed. He's developed. He's changed since the first book, Interview with the Vampire. I think you'd agree. He's really the villain in that book, and he's seen from Louis' eyes. But by the second book, he's got his own voice. And that took a lot of, you know, getting down with him and thinking about him. And again, it felt like channeling him. And then he finally started to talk. And he's never really changed since then so much. He's just gone through phases with me. Whatever I go through, he goes through. You know, if I go through pain and loss, he goes through pain and loss. And I've never been able to create any other character that I felt the same about. I mean, he's with me all the time. You know, wherever I go, I'm really thinking, well, what do you think about this, Lestat? I mean, where we are, the hotel, or the country, or the city, or what do you think? You know, I take him with me everywhere. He goes with me everywhere.
And I mean, it's not just him. You have gone through every other vampire and brought them out again. Am I right that you reread your own books from the beginning?
I did. I would like to believe I remember every single solitary word I ever wrote. I don't. And I did. I went back and read just whole chunks of them, you know, and I immediately wanted to just immediately start writing.
What was that like to read over the old work?
Well, it was a little discouraging to realize I'd forgotten so much, you know. But it was a challenge. It stimulated me. I wanted to rush right to the keyboard and start writing. You know, I would read little bits, go write, then read little bits some more, then go write. And a lot of what I wrote were notes, and you know, I talk with myself about a book. I chat about it in writing, you know, and I keep all that on my computer. I file all that away. And then when I finally get ready to do the book, there might be, you know, I don't know, 500 pages of that kind of chatting and note-taking beforehand. And I don't really go back and read it or look at it or make an outline so much as it prepares me. It gets me, and it's living in my mind, you know.
And then you can make the book.
Then when the book starts to flow, I just write from beginning to end. I grew up thinking that the movies were shot that way, from beginning to end, you know, and that everybody was really experiencing all the changes emotionally in the movie. It was such a sad day when I realized they shot all these different pieces and put it together. So I write a book right from the beginning to the end, and it grows, you know, and I do go back and forth in that book on the computer, polishing and changing, bringing up to date, but it really moves right through. And when I finish, I have only one draft, and it's the finished draft.
And that's what you
That's
send
when I
to
send to
Vicky.
Vicky. Yeah. Well, now I have sense enough to let it rest overnight, you know, in case I want to change something in the morning. So in the old days, I would send it off, you know, and then they'd be frantic pages being sent. Replace 41 with this page, you know. But now I do wait, and then when I finally send it off, I'm pretty totally committed to it, you know. It works for me to do it that way. Yeah.
And you've got like 2 computer screens. I'm just now wanting to imitate you.
I have 3.
3 computer
Yeah.
screens.
The idea is
You
to
were
blot
technologically
out.
way ahead of everyone else.
Well, not really. I mean, I can't drive. You're talking to somebody that
Oh,
doesn't know
okay.
how to drive a car. But, you know, there's a big screen in the middle, and then there are 2 huge monitors. What that does is it blots out the world, takes everything away from you. And of course, it makes it simple to organize. Like, one of the craziest things about writing a book at this point is keeping straight the characters' names, the spelling of the names, the color of the eyes and the hair and the height. I mean, it's ridiculous, but it's true. And so I can put a list up on one monitor while I'm writing and just write on the central monitor, and then any other notes I have I can put on the other monitor.
And the internet is off.
No, I go over to Facebook over and over again and come back. The internet is never off.
That is a champion.
Now, one thing I'm dying to ask you is, when you get this, do you read it on the screen, or do you still print it out?
Absolutely not. No, I can't read manuscripts on screen.
you print it
No, I
out.
read manuscripts. Audrey can attest.
So you still go at it with the pencil and everything?
Well, I've changed to red pen so that it's easy for people to see, because we're all becoming what I call Jerry Hatricks. And so it's just easier to see, yeah.
Yeah.
But basically, yes, I read manuscripts.
So even when I send back, like, the copy edited stuff, you print that out and you read it at that point again, right?
Yeah, but I don't reread it. I mean, I'll look through it to
You look
see.
through it, yeah. Okay. Because I'm now doing everything on the screen, the copy editing and the first pass. The first pass, it used to be called the Unbound Galleys, you know. You get that sheet, and those stages you can go through and make many refinements and many changes. Too many sometimes, you know. But I do all that now on the screen.
Well, I can tell you that
it takes me years to get
it
to
makes
that point.
everybody at Knopf very happy.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was doing my book, and Simon & Schuster said, tiptoed and gingerly said, would you like it on screen? I said, do not send it to me that way. There will be tears, and they will definitely be mine.
Yeah.
And do you guys meet in person or over the phone, or how do you?
We talk on the phone a lot, I'd say. Our in-person meetings are just every few years, really, you know. Once a year at best, I mean, you know, maybe, whatever.
You've never cut any sex scene from a book, have you?
Are you kidding?
Thank you.
She wouldn't cut a sex.
There's a sex scene that we're not getting.
You mean from Anne?
Yeah.
No.
What a thought.
But there have been those. I mean, I can think of one. I'm not going to mention the name. One book where I just said, you know, I don't think the sex is right for the age in which you're writing. But you know what? That was an interesting conversation that we
I
had.
didn't remember that.
No, it
Yeah,
wasn't for
sure.
you.
Oh.
It was with another
Oh,
writer.
really?
No,
you told the writer that the sex wasn't right for the age
Well,
of the
I thought
character?
not for the age of the character, but for the time.
Oh, I see. Yeah, sure.
Sex is always right. No, I'm sure you're right.
No, but
Funny, that's
one of
what
the-
he said.
But one of the things you have a very good ear for is something that's going to sound too modern to a reader. You know, because you've pointed that out a number of times. A character may say something, and it's entirely plausible that somebody in the 18th century or the first century actually said this, but it's not going to sound that way to the modern reader. And I've always listened when you've said it, because I think you have a very good sense of that. You know, very good sense of something sounding jarringly contemporary.
Right.
Yeah. But no, Vicki never cuts any sex scenes out of my book.
No, in fact, I say, oh my God, I can't believe she's going to do this. I've said that as I'm turning the pages.
Yeah.
And then you'll do, not only will you do that, but you'll go so much further. And Anne never disappoints. But it's not really about sex. It's so much more sensual or erotic or daring. I mean, in some of the earlier vampire books, that it was just so beyond the beyond. But it was great. I mean, that is what you want. You want to read a book and have an experience.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, as a gay man, you've heard it from all of us that the books, I know you didn't mean it this way at all, but it was a huge thing to read those books because no one had written anything that felt like that kind of love and sensuality before without any apology, like ever.
I love to hear that. I love to hear it. I'm surprised to hear it, but I love to hear it, you know, because it was so natural to do it that way. And I actually, I don't know, you know, I've heard that fantasy writers who create an alternative reality when they write, that they don't feel they can touch their own reality, what they have to say, until they get in that fantasy mode. And that happened to me. And when I stumbled on it with Interview with the Vampire and created a novel in which everybody was a vampire, I felt a remarkable freedom to describe just exactly what I felt. And so everything in the novel was an outpouring of the way I feel. I have never had any kind of firm gender identity. You know, I'm always jarred and shocked when someone reminds me that they see me as a female, especially if they say it in a pejorative way. It's always a stunning moment, you know. And that comes through in the writing because it's completely natural. I don't really see the people as men and women. I just see them as souls, as entities, as beings. And of course, whether they're male or female means a lot in the text, but it means a lot like the color of their eyes, their hair, the timbre of their voice, their gestures, their grace, you know, it's part of their being, but it's not a category of being for me. So it's I just do that and I can't take any credit for it. It's the way it comes out.
I think you can take total credit for that. I mean, I know, and you may have noticed it too, reading back over your books, how much you read over so many of them and you get a sort of sense of a philosophy of total freedom from the difficult rules of life that would be a better way to live. And so even saying, now looking back that they were gay characters isn't right because the characters are actually more free than even those labels. That was I'm reading this, and it's far ahead of its time. 70s, 80s, you know.
76.
You can imagine the luck to hit an editor who received all that without any censure. You know, who didn't say, oh, we'd like to publish this, but we really feel you need to tone down the gay stuff, you know, or this is not going to go over. I mean, never a word was spoken like that from Vicki, never, you know. And that was, I remember the review, you probably don't because you have this wonderful ability to forget unpleasant things. But when the New York Times reviewed Interview with the Vampire, one of the things that the reviewer said was, Anne Rice thinks it's perfectly all right for men to sleep with men.
Really?
Yeah, he actually said this in the pages in the New York Times. She seems to think it's just fine if people are homosexual.
But you know, Andy, I
mean,
think
it's
what you
amazing.
said is right, because I think that what was so crucial about those books was that it was a portrait of people, of beings existing outside of convention.
Yeah.
And that is, of course, that's the world I inhabit. But you know, it took a long time for the world to catch up to these books, a long time. Really, it did. And then it sort of became, and now, you know, I walk down the street and I'll see these posters for vampires, and you know, it's like, it's taking something that was so interesting, really, and making it so uninteresting. Because the vampiredom was not really the issue. It's, as they say, the false issue. I mean, yes, it was about that. Yes, it was all of that cosmology, but it was, you know, it was about being outside of convention and living with a sort of loneliness and trying to cope with that.
Do you think the world's lonely?
I think well, I mean, I'm talking, and you answer it, but I think that those characters were because they were outside of, and that that those feelings of loneliness exist for everybody, and how you cope with them or how you transcend them or use them or whatever, I think is interesting.
I used to think the vampire was a perfect metaphor for everybody because we all in our hearts feel like outsiders and outcasts and monsters to some extent, but I have found out that not everybody does feel that way. You know, but I certainly did as a young person growing up, very much an outcast and very much a person that was told over and over again that I was abnormal and strange, and sometimes people just flat out tell you that what you feel is not what you feel. You know, I remember arguing in the 50s, or not arguing, but talking about the fact that I would really love to see naked men's bodies. And I had never seen any. I didn't have any brothers, and my father, I never saw him naked, you know, and I thought the male body is really beautiful. And I remember people looking me right in the eye and saying, no, women are not attracted to men's bodies. The male body is not attractive. So, well, wait a minute, I think it's attractive. No, women are not attracted to men's bodies. They're attracted to what men do. And I mean, they would just go right on in the conversation. Well, can you imagine what a relief to me it was that decades passed and now women are out of the closet about wanting to see men naked, and it's fine, and we get to do it all the time. You know, it's just totally cool. But I really did live through that in the 50s and 60s. You know, people telling me that if I pulled my sweater over my head this way, I wasn't feminine, I was doing it like a man. And that was not the way to pull my sweater off.
I used to have to look at my fingers like this or like that.
Yeah, exactly. There were all these rules. You know, you take your steps are too big, and that you're not walking like a girl. You know, God, and behind all this was that terrible. You know, in Catholic schools where everybody's the same gender, there's always that whispering about people who are attracted to their own gender. You know, you don't want to be like them, and you know that horror. So I grew up with that stuff, and I poured it all out in my writing. That was where I could talk
Thank God you did
about
grow
it.
up with all of that stuff.
I
It
guess
looked like
so,
you
yeah.
I'm sorry, but so did everyone else, and they just
Well,
held it
were they
inside.
still growing up with this when you were growing up?
I didn't grow up with this stuff.
No?
No, I mean, my parents were naked on the beach, and I grew up with, nice Jewish intellectual girl, and,
Great, that would have been heaven.
I was raised to be a prince, not a princess, and do whatever, no, it's not the world I grew up in.
You were raised to be a prince, and this book is Prince Lestat.
Prince Lestat.
Interesting. Okay, that's cool.
Now here, I mean, they did seem very lonely in the first vampire books, but I've been trying not to give anything away about
Yeah,
talking about this
yeah.
because it's so important what happens in it, but it feels like there's a change in the vampire loneliness.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's definitely the whole tribe is in revolt. They don't want to be in the shadows anymore. Or they're fine with being in the shadows. They don't really want to be messed with by the human race. But they're cool with that. But they want their own pride, their own identity. And one of the things Benji Mahmood, the little vampire TV personality, radio personality in the book says, he says, and hell shall have no dominion. He says that over and over again. Stop telling us about hell. Stop telling us we're abominations, that we're damned. We're not listening to that stuff. We're a tribe, and we need parents, and we need elders, and we need guidance. And that was really what the book is about. It was about the tribe demanding this and coming to Lestat and saying, we want you to be the leader. We want you to take over. And of course, he doesn't want to do it, because the leader of any group is the least free member of that group, and he doesn't want to be a member, period. But the book's about that, and that is a continuation of what I wrote about in all those other books where they are considered to be abominations, and they aren't considered to have any real right to exist, and certainly no right to be happy. And they revolt against that.
And had trouble staying together, bound together for too long. That always seems so sad to me.
Yeah. Well, I felt like all through the early books, I closed one door after another, one tragedy after another. If they got together and they established a great coven in Florida, that would be broken up by the next book. And in this book, I thought, I want to do something completely different. I want to open doors for them. I want to bring them together. I want to have new combinations, and I want to explore that. And I want, this to be the first of 3 or 4 books where that happens. Thank you.
I think it's maybe time to take some questions from the audience.
Well, I see hands.
Go ahead. You.
First, I have one statement. I wanted to let you know that the interview really did help you come out. So thank you for that.
Oh, great. I'm glad.
Did Tom Cruise really look like you envisioned Lestat to look?
Well, no, Tom Cruise didn't look anything like Lestat, but I tell you what I think happened. I think Tom did his very best to be that character. I think he had a great deal of respect for what was written in the book, and David Geffen, the producer, did too. And Tom really brought Lestat's personality into that movie. He got it. And, the mystery of Tom Cruise is that he's actually a much better actor than people give him credit for. And he's very conscientious about what he does. And he really got Lestat. He brought that star power that he has to my hero. And when I saw the movie, I was just knocked out by what he did. I felt I was watching my characters up there.
Now, I thought Brad Pitt was excellent.
Yeah, Brad Pitt was very successful as Louis because Brad Pitt hated the movie and hated everybody and didn't want to do it, as we hear, But that translated as Louis's melancholy and angst about being a vampire. So if it works, it works,
Can you say anything about future movie things, or?
Oh, well, Universal Studios wants to reboot what they call the franchise, and that's all the vampire books. And we are going to be having our first creative talks in November. I want to sit down with everybody involved and tell them what I think the readers want and what I think would work here. And yeah, thank you. Really appreciate that. And it's amazing how long we've gone on negotiating before we got to this point. And the reason was because the negotiations could fall through at any point. But we're finally there with the negotiations, and so we're going to have these meetings. And I'm very relieved that the script that got us to this point with Universal is a script written by my son, Christopher Rice. And he really did a bang-up job of writing what his mother wanted. But he'd probably be so upset if he heard that I said that. Because the truth is, I dragged him to the table. I said, look, I want you to do this script. I want you to do it on spec. Nobody's got the money to pay us. You just got to do this script. And he didn't want to do it. You know, he said, they're not going to take me seriously, Mom. You know, it's never. And I said, do it, do it. You don't know how bad the scripts are that have been done on this stuff. And finally, when he saw one, you know, it was not a bad person or a badly written script, but it was just not the Vampire Chronicles. He saw that and he thought, oh, wow, I get it. He sat down and he wrote a script for The Tale of the Body Thief, which was the book they wanted to begin with at that point. And I functioned as a producer, just telling him giving him all kinds of advice. And he really wrote a bang-up script, and that's what got Universal to come to the table. They read that script, and there they had something that would make, as they put it, let me see if I can get this right, a 4-quadrant tentpole movie, because, you know, it's a big, you know, whatever. And it was Chris that did that. And so now, of course, the deal's almost done. I think they're getting calls from people all over who want to do scripts and want to tell them their ideas. But we're going to have our meeting with them in November, and I think it'll go well. This is a collaborative process. You can never tell what's going to happen. You can sit down with people, they can smile at you, pour your sparkly water for you, and just listen to you, and then go off and do something so different from what you want that it just breaks your heart. And I found that in any collaborative adaptation of these works, whether it's a musical, whether it's a movie, whether it's TV, whatever it is, that can happen. And so it's going to be painful. But I'm going to try to not become hysterical and just, and work with the people involved. Imagine Entertainment, they are the people who really want to produce it. It's Brian Grazer and Erica Huggins, and they are great movie makers, and I believe they want to do it right. They had to get Universal to come in because Universal's the big studio, the money, the distribution, everything. And it's worked, and we've actually, after years of talking, we've got everybody in place wanting to do this. So I hope it's going to work. I think it's worth the pain, let's put it that way, because we might get really great movies out of it, and they might cast Pee Wee Herman, you know? I love Pee Wee Herman, by the way.
He was a vampire.
I really love Pee Wee Herman.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer, he was a vampire.
Hi, Ann, it's Sebastian from Paris again. I've really been a fan of yours for many years. Of course, you hear that every day. But most importantly, do you find now that Chris is getting involved in your creative process, that he's becoming a muse to you like Stan?
I'm sorry, is Chris?
Stan, a lot of people have said that you and Stan Rice, your husband, were collaborative partners. He was a muse for you. Not a moose, a muse.
No, Stan and I were never collaborative partners.
No?
Stan was a poet, and it was wonderful to take my books to Stan to read, and he always gave me the best feedback, but we were in no way collaborative partners. Not at all. And Chris, the great thing about Chris is he has his own career. He has his own novels. His new novel, Divines, is out now. And he's got his own world, but he happens to be a really good scriptwriter. And he knows these characters. He grew up with them. You know, he grew up hearing about Lestat and Armand and Louis all the time. And I'm very glad I was able to get him to do the script. And I think he's going to be very influential with the movie.
Have you decided who you have in the new generation of who's going to be Lestat?
Well, I probably won't be the person who determines that, but I'll tell you, there are so many more actors today than there were 20 years ago that can play these roles, because we've had, you know, the whole Lord of the Rings success, the Harry Potter films, the Game of Thrones. There are many, many actors doing fantasy roles and sort of high diction and very special sort of otherworldly roles on TV and in movies. And there's just tons of them. And they're really good at it. And most of them are coming out of England and Australia and Canada. And there are many choices. You can just point, sometimes on the Facebook page, we'll all talk about who we want to play Lestat. And there's suggestions from everywhere. Just all kinds of European models and actors show up on the page, and people from all of these different movies that have been so successful. I mean, this is like a golden age right now in television and movies for fantasy and speculative fiction and historical drama, which functions very much the same way as science fiction, actually. And it's really just a great time. I don't think they're going to have any trouble casting these people. 20 years ago, the studio, I think, gave them a list of like 5 top box office earners and said, you have to choose one for Lestat. There's no choice. I think they were actually, I think Neil Jordan was given that choice. In fact, it was down to 2. It was either Richard Gere or Tom Cruise, or we don't make your movie. I mean, it really was like that. That's the gossip I heard. But now there are just so many people. And I am hoping and praying it'll be a really great actor who can convince people that he's a 250-year-old immortal, you know? I think that's very important.
One last quick thing. I'm really excited that Twilight's over. And you're coming back. I want to thank you for bringing Lestat back in the right time frame, because we need the romantic, homoerotic, rock and roll star, Tom Cruise. We need to have Lestat home, and I'm very grateful that you did this, because my mom introduced me to you, and tonight I want you to sign a book to her. And so, rock and roll, and thank you for bringing Lestat.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for that.
Maybe
All right.
one more?
There's a hand right there. There's one hand.
Right there?
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
Just a quick question. When you started the Christ the Lord series, you said you were done with the vampires and everything else, and I wanted to know if you were going to continue to do the Christ the Lord series or the Angel Time series, or is that done?
Am I going to continue them? Well, I tell you, I broke down with the Christ the Lord series because I love doing the backstory of Jesus. Like, what was it like at 3 in the afternoon on an ordinary day in Nazareth? And I love doing that. But to continue the series, I'd have to move into the public life of Jesus. And that's where the great 2,000-year-old theological brawl lives. It's over the public life of Jesus. What did he really mean? What did he really say? Did he really believe in the devil? Did he really believe in hell? Blah, blah, blah. And I can't bring my work into that world. If I figure a way to continue the series writing about him in an informal, very personal way, that's not, that's true to everything I believe, I will continue it. But I haven't been able to find that way. And I'd like to see those 2 books that I did, Christ the Lord Out of Egypt and Christ the Lord, The Road to Cana, just framed as maybe the early years of the Lord, as presented by this one writer. And I'm not sure that the series will go on. Angel Time, I want very much to get back to, because I really believe in that series, and thank you.
And is there a movie? Am I right?
You for things like you made Christ personal, like a person as opposed to this, deity or spirit. So that's
Yeah.
why I was hoping that you could take.
Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to say that it was the biggest challenge I ever faced as a writer, writing those books about Jesus, because I was determined that they would be theologically and biblically accurate, and this would be the Son of God. This would be what was in the Bible, all of it, the angels, the shepherds, everything. And yet I would try to make him a living, breathing character for someone, even if they had no interest in him and never thought about him before, or they were very religiously inclined. And I really tried to meet that challenge, and I'm proud of what I did in those books. So I thank you. I thank you very much for that. Thanks.